Hello and welcome to Ask a Property Manager, episode 32. Today is August 5th, 2020. Coming to you live from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo Inc. I'm Andrew Schultz, principal broker of Own Buffalo. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about a couple of interesting news stories, as well as answering some questions from landlords around the country. Before we jump to that, let's plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager drop every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern, live on our Facebook page. You can catch those at facebook.com/Buffalo Foreclosed Homes. The same day that we do these, every Wednesday, you can find the replay both on our Facebook page and on our YouTube page. You can grab a link to our YouTube page from our website over at ownbuffalo.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram. We do post a little bit different stuff there than what we would post either on Facebook or YouTube, so make sure you're following there as well. And last but not least, don't forget that you can grab a free 30-minute phone or Zoom consultation over at ownbuffalo.com, clicking on the button. You can see I've got a couple of time slots still open and available for this week, and I do have a couple of time slots available for next week as well. Again, that's a free 30-minute phone call or a Zoom call, whatever your preference is. You can catch that over at ownbuffalo.com. There will be a button to click on where you can grab one of those time slots. And definitely take advantage of that. It's a good opportunity to get in front of me, ask questions that you might not be comfortable asking, either in the comment section or something like that. It is a private consultation call, so feel free to take advantage of that. Last but not least, the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. New episode drops every Thursday morning. This week's episode, we're going to be discussing how to market an apartment for rent, what happens when your tenants are stealing electricity, and the questions that you have to ask on your rental application, the things that you have to make sure that you're including when you're designing your rental application. So don't miss out. Again, new episodes drop every Thursday morning, everywhere podcasts can be heard. You can also grab a copy over at rentprep.com/podcast. So I want to jump over to desktop here real quick. There are two news stories that I wanted to talk about today. The first is the unfortunate murder of a landlord in Hartford, Connecticut area. We're going to read this article in its entirety, and then we're going to jump over to another article that's talking about some rental statistics, what markets are winning and what markets are losing in the rental market year over year. But let's start with this first article. This is again coming out of the Hartford, Connecticut area. This was a landlord-tenant dispute that ultimately resulted in the death of the landlord, the murder of the landlord by the tenant. We're going to read this article in its entirety. A Connecticut man decapitated his landlord with a sword after being told he had to move out because of overdue rent, Hartford police say. The Hartford Police Department responded to a 911 call Saturday morning from the landlord, Victor King, who said that his roommate, Jerry Thompson, had been waving a sword at him in a threatening and terrorizing manner amid a rent dispute, according to an arrest warrant filed by Hartford detectives. King gave officers Thompson's cell phone number. According to the warrant, it does not say if police spoke to Thompson on Saturday. The next day, police received calls from a neighbor and then a separate friend of King's, King being the landlord here, who were concerned about his safety, the warrant said. Police entered the residence Sunday afternoon to find a grisly crime scene and King's body covered by numerous articles of bedding on the floor, according to the warrant. A medical examiner investigator's preliminary observation suggested that King's injuries were consistent with a large-edged weapon, noting that lacerations to the landlord's right arm, upper chest, and across the neck, causing decapitation. Surveillance video also caught a male exiting a white Jeep carrying a long, skinny white object in his hand, walking into the residence Saturday afternoon, and exiting about 30 minutes later with the same object, the warrant said. When questioned by police, Thompson refused to speak, but wrote on a sheet of paper that the paper in glove compartment in Jeep is all you need, the detective said. Once a search warrant was obtained, police found paperwork suggesting Thompson believed he was a sovereign citizen or an individual who believes he is not subject to any statutes, and interprets law in their own way, the detectives wrote. The amount of rent owed and Thompson's employment status were not known. The victim's cousin, Jim Banks, told the Hartford Courant King that King was one of the good guys, one that would never hurt a soul, one that would always reach out and help others. He was as pleasant as can be, always seemed to be happy. He was just a joy to be around. King was an accomplished bridge player as well. He was very good at it, very good at teaching others to play it, just a kind and gentle person whose first love was bridge. Shortly after, Thompson was charged with murder Detectives and members of the Hartford Police dive team recovered the suspected murder weapon about 10 miles away in the Farmington River. Department spokesman Lieutenant Paul Cicero told CNN. Cicero said King was Thompson's landlord. He said police found their rental agreement during the investigation. At his arraignment Tuesday in Hartford Superior Court, Thompson refused to speak with a public defender, so he was not assigned one. According to an audio recording of the proceeding, he was detained in lieu of a $2 million bond before his next court appearance on August 18th, according to the recording and State Department of Corrections. So this is a tragic story no matter how you slice it. It's unfortunate that this situation elevated to the point, sounds like it was a landlord-tenant dispute over rent that elevated to the point where you now have, one party who's been killed and another party who is in jail, basically awaiting trial for murder. And it's unfortunate that it came to this position. It sounds to me like this was a gentleman was renting a room in his house, probably a house hack of some variety or something like that. Whenever you're inviting people to live in the same residence that you live in, there's obviously going to be concerns above and beyond that of just a typical tenant placement or something along those lines. Definitely make sure that you're doing your due diligence in a situation like this. I don't know, obviously, it doesn't really speak to how long the tenant was living in there, or at least I don't remember seeing it in the article here. I don't believe that this was a super long-term tenancy. I think this was something that was a little bit more recent, but unfortunately, we're in the position that we're in because of that. Before I move on, I will say that the industry as a whole, property management, being a housing provider as a whole, the industry has taken a lot of flack in the last few months, especially with regards to, the collection of rent during global pandemics, this, that, the other thing. It's a very different industry now than it was at the start of 2020. Honestly, it's a very different industry at the start of 2020 than it was even at the start of 2019. There's been a lot of legislation passed having to do with the landlord-tenant relationship, how housing providers are expected to operate, how tenants are expected to operate in these lease agreements and things like that. It's a very different scenario than what we're used to. It's a very different scenario than what it's been for a long time. I'm not advocating that everybody go out and buy weapons to protect themselves and this and that and the other thing. That's a personal decision. Do what you will. One thing I will say is that situational awareness is something that you can teach yourself for free. Won't cost you a thing, and you'd be surprised at how often your situational awareness will keep you out of a nasty situation. Even just the forethought of, when you walk into an apartment to show it to someone, is the tenant following behind you? Are they blocking your egress to a door? Things like that. Situational awareness is something that could cost you nothing and could save your life. You can definitely find a lot of information on YouTube as to how to build a situational awareness in your mind, how to develop that mindset. Again, it's not something that'll cost you anything, and it could save your life. I'm not going to advocate that everybody go out and buy pepper spray, a knife, a gun, whatever. But there's a lot of things that you can do. Basic self-defense courses and situational awareness are two things that you can do to help protect yourself, so that hopefully you don't find yourself in a spot where you might get into an altercation with a tenant, or with anybody really. It doesn't need to be landlord-tenant related. Even simple things like when you walk into a restaurant, for instance. The old Italian mafia movies, they always say you want to be facing the door so you can see who's coming in. That's a situational awareness thing at its most basic level. So something to consider. Protect yourselves out there. Make sure that you're staying safe whenever possible. That's my little soapbox spiel for today with regards to making sure that you're staying safe. I want to go back to desktop here. This is an article from wolfstreet.com. We're going to bounce around this article a little bit. This article basically is in discussion of what markets are winning and what markets are losing when it comes to rental rates year over year. And what they're doing is they're basing it off of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments. So we're only looking at 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. It's important to note that at the onset of this, because there's obviously more than 1- and 2-bedroom apartments in every market. But I did want to take some time and kind of run through this article a little bit to show that there are some markets that are winning and there are some markets that are losing as a result of all this. One thing I do want to mention, I'm going to read this top part about San Francisco. The most expensive market in the country, according to this article, skids hard. The median asking rent in San Francisco for one-bedroom apartments dropped again 2.4% in July from June to $3,200. Brings a 2-month decline to 4.8%, and the 12-month decline to 11.8%. That's huge. 11.8% is a huge decline in 12 months. From the peak in June of 2019, which had barely eked past the prior record of October 2015, the median asking rent has now plunged 14%. That's a lot very fast. Excuse me. For two-bedroom apartments, median asking rent dropped 3.0 in July from June to $4,210, bringing in a 2-month decline of 4.8% and a 12-month of 12.1%. That's huge. Since the peak in October 2015, the median asking for two-bedroom apartments has now dropped 15.8%. Keep in mind, these are stats from San Francisco, which is one of the most expensive markets in the country. We're going to scroll down a little bit, and I wanted to look at this graph here, this chart here, the 17 most expensive U.S. rental markets as of July 2020. You can see a lot of these are major metro areas. So this is one bedrooms, and then down here is two bedrooms. But a lot of these are major metro areas that are having major impacts. So we're looking at, in just California alone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of the 17, if my math is right, one-bedroom cities are from California. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 17 two-beds, again, California. And you're seeing this as the major metros: San Francisco, New York, Boston, DC, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Diego, Honolulu. Honolulu's kind of an outlier, I would say, because Hawaii is always more expensive. Chicago. It's interesting to see, what markets are climbing and what markets are not climbing. So when you look at San Francisco, you can see they're down 11.1% on one bedrooms from a year ago. And then down here again, they let in two bedrooms. They're down to 12% in two bedrooms. So this chart down here is a little bit more. This is 35 cities with declines in one-bedroom rents. One city I was kind of surprised to see on here was Syracuse, and I actually reached out to another real estate broker who does investment property as well. He actually owns some property in Syracuse. So I reached out to him to say, hey, what are you seeing in terms of rents in the Syracuse area? And he was basically telling me that, Syracuse had always kind of been a little bit further along than what Buffalo was, and now it seems though Buffalo is kind of catching up. So it's not so much that he thinks Syracuse is declining, it's that Buffalo and other markets are catching up a little bit. The stats obviously tell a little bit different tale. We're looking here, Syracuse being the largest by percentage decline for one-bedroom units. And obviously you can see some of these other stats here. New York City, that one does not surprise me at all to see rents going down in New York City. There are a lot of people who are leaving large metros right now as a result of everything that's going on with the pandemic. Orlando, this one doesn't surprise me so much because Orlando is a hospitality and tourism city, and hospitality and tourism are two things that really aren't happening on a large scale. I understand that the parks and stuff are open down there, but it's certainly going to be a long time before it recovers. Los Angeles, another city that's been hit very, very hard with everything that's going on. So, and this was the biggest losers in one bedrooms. And now I want to look at the biggest winners in one bedrooms. And one thing that I thought was interesting is you're seeing a lot of Ohio on here. Cleveland, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio. I think Akron is down here a little bit further. Ohio is one of those markets or one of those states where you see a lot of investors kind of looking right now. I would also say that Tennessee would be on there as well. I'm going to go ahead and you'll say, you've got Chattanooga, Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville and Memphis are markets that we've talked about, even with some of our clients. It's a little bit different than what Buffalo is, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then when you look, actually, you'll see Rochester, our next door neighbors, have grown 14.3% on one bedrooms over the course of the last year. And Buffalo is down here as well. I don't think our median rent is $1,050 on a one bedroom, to be honest with you. There's a driver behind this number, I think, and it's the fact that there's been a lot of development, a lot of lofts and things like that that have been being built in the downtown area of Buffalo. Those tend to be more expensive. They cater to a more high-end clientele. It's not what I would consider to be affordable housing for the masses. It's catering to a more high-end or a luxury client in most instances, I would say. And I think that that's artificially propping that number up because, again, we are talking about one-bedroom apartments. And I don't know if too many normal one-bedroom apartments, in a standard duplex scenario that are renting in that $1,050 a month range. So I think what you're finding there is on those one beds, most of those, when you go to look deeper, you're going to find that those are going to be recent conversions, warehouse to loft conversions and things of that. So wrapping up the article, this is actually a pretty important paragraph. I did want to make sure that I read through this. This is still very, very early in the game, so to speak. The game being the consequences of the large-scale move to a work from home, which allows people to live anywhere for now. It goes on to talk about historic unemployment and also the oil and gas bust that's been washing over the oil-producing regions. That's been a huge thing, especially less demand for fuel right now. Number one, it's summer, so there's less demand for fuel in the form of gas and oil for heating. And then again for vehicles, because there's not as much travel and things like that going on. There's not as much air travel taking place. So there's definitely been a little bit of a decline, not even a little bit, a large decline in oil production and things like that. In addition, you have the pandemic on top of all of that. So part of what we're seeing is people leaving the expensive markets and moving to cheaper markets, maybe moving back home or whatever, either because they lost their jobs or because they're allowed to work from anywhere. We are seeing this. As a matter of fact, I've seen it with people moving from New York City to the Buffalo region. Maybe they're coming home. They moved out of Buffalo to take that job in the big city or whatever. Now they can work from home and they want to come back to be with their family. Or they've realized, hey, if I can work from home, I don't have to spend stupid crazy money to live in a coat closet in New York City when I can have an actual home here in Buffalo, things like that. So we are starting to see that in our market. There is a fair number of people who are moving from large metros back to smaller metros. And even from smaller metros, I'm seeing some of the smaller metro people who are living like in the city of Buffalo making the decision to move either into a less crowded suburb or even further out into a more rural setting. So it really is a big shift right now, and this is definitely the first wave of it, if you will. I think that you will see more and more change as time goes on. I think the other thing that you're going to see impacting rents is going to be the fact that we are going to have a wave of evictions coming down the pipeline as the moratoriums and things start to lift. You're going to see a lot of people shifting around. You're going to see rents moving up and down as a result of that as well. So that is something to keep in mind. That's my thoughts on that. If you want to take a look at this article, you can definitely go over to wolfstreet.com. I will leave the title up there for a second, so if you guys want to copy that over, you can go right to wolfstreet.com and search for that article title. Let's jump into a couple of questions from landlords from around the country. Today, I think we got 3 questions here today. We're going to start with, this one was a fresh one. This was posted this morning, and this was actually posted by a landlord from the Buffalo region. This was posted on the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. That's a good free resource, just shy of 12,000 members strong. If you're not tied into that group, you can pick that up over at facebook.com/groups/rentprep. Just shy of 12,000 members strong. It's a great free resource to tie into, to be able to ask questions from landlords, get responses from landlords around the country. You never know when somebody else might have a little bit different or a little bit better perspective that helps you to solve a problem that you have or solve a problem you didn't even know you had yet. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, from the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group, I found a way to stop running to the post office every time we have to do certified mailings. Somebody posted a link to a website where you go on, you buy your certified mailing through them, you basically fold your piece of paper over and make sure that that's the front page of your envelope. It'd be a clear envelope. You would slide that in to be the front page of your envelope. It's got your tracking and everything on it. And it means that we don't have to go and stand in line at the post office for 45 minutes, which is huge for us. So, if you're in a situation where you're looking to learn something new every day, the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group is a great place to do that. Now we'll get into the questions. How often, if ever, do you send reminders about policies and responsibilities to your tenants? For example, just in the last 2 weeks, we had one duplex sewer line back up due to flushable wipes. Another duplex was fined by the city for leaving trash cans out a day after trash collection. Tenant responsibility agreed to in the lease. I'm considering using these as a general reason to send out reminder notices to all tenants. I'm curious, how often and for what reasons do you send out mass communications? Generally, we won't send a mass communication unless we have to. As a matter of fact, we sent a mass communication at the beginning of the pandemic, letting people know that what our office situation was when we were working from home. And I think that that's probably the most of a mass communication that we've sent to our clients, or I'm sorry, to our tenants in quite a while. Generally speaking, we don't do mass notifications. We do individual notifications when there is some sort of a lease violation or something along those lines. So we send the reminder whenever there's a broken policy. Generally speaking, we start with a verbal warning. We'll call the tenant and say, hey, we got a fine for leaving the trash bins out. I guess this one probably wouldn't be the best example because a fine, we would automatically back bill it to the tenant. What I would do in that instance would be I would send a written letter to the tenant saying, we've been fined by the city of Buffalo for failure to bring the garbage cans back to the side of the property or back to the rear of the property. Per your lease section, whatever, you're responsible for taking care of this. Per your lease section, whatever, you're responsible for any fees associated with noncompliance with city regulations, making sure that you highlight those two sections of the lease. And I would send them the copy of the violation letter from the city of Buffalo, and just pay it and put it against their tenant ledger so that they're responsible with it for their next month's rent. So that would be basically a 4-page letter for us. The letter basically telling them, hey, this is the violation. We've been fined by the city of Buffalo. We're passing that fine on to you. The next page would be the copy of the lease section stating that they're responsible for the trash can. Third page would be the copy of the page of the lease showing that they're responsible for the fee that's been incurred. And then the fourth page would be I would send a copy of the violation so the tenant understands that you're not just making this up, that it is actually a legitimate fine. And that's how I would handle a situation like that. Flushable wipes, that's another one where, it's in the lease that if tenants clog the plumbing and it's not as a result of roots or a line shift or something like that, that the tenants are going to be responsible for the cost of that plumbing. So if it's, you had a duplex sewer line backup due to flushable wipes, you have 2 units there. In that instance, and actually written into our leases, we specify that if we're unable to determine the cause, if we're unable to determine what tenant caused the issue, that the charge gets split across all occupied apartments, and that every apartment becomes responsible for a portion of that bill. So with something like your flushable wipes, I would take that and split it in half and charge each tenant for half of that bill. And you're probably going to get some flack from the tenants, but by the same token, you didn't throw the flushable wipes down the toilet. One of them did. So they're both going to deny. You're never going to really find out what the truth of the matter is, but hopefully that's one of those situations where it self-corrects by them never flushing flushable wipes again once they've had that charge. So that's kind of my thought on that. Generally speaking, our policy is verbal warning first, followed up by documenting it on your end. So making sure if you have maybe tenant management software, put a note on their account, spoke to John Tenant on August 5th at 10:23 in the morning, talked to him about making sure that garbage cans are taken to the street and pulled back from the street at specific times or whatever. The next thing I would do would be follow it up with a written violation in the event that the tenant does not correct the action or does not correct the violation, and specify in the written communication, again, you're in violation. We've already talked to you about this on this date and time. You're still in violation. You have until X date to take care of this, or we're going to take care of it and back bill you, whatever the case may be. And then finally do it, and then send a final communication letting them know that you took you went ahead and resolved the issue on behalf of the tenant, and then they're being charged X amount for resolving the issue because they refuse to get compliant. So generally speaking, most tenants don't like being charged extra for things that go wrong. You'll normally find that once somebody gets dinged for like a plumbing charge or something like that, cooking grease down the drains or something that clogs a drain, once you get one of those, you'll find that most tenants will be a lot more cautious and a lot more compliant when it comes to not dumping grease down drains and stuff like that. So that's my advice on that one. Choosing appliances, looking for suggestions, comparable price, electric range, which one should I buy for a rental, smooth top or regular burner? So I guess we're talking about glass top versus a traditional coil stove. This is a question that's best decided by your market. And the reason I say that is because, you know, if you go out and buy a coil burner stove, but you have a $3,500 a month rent, that's probably not going to be consistent with what the market is telling you you should be installing. You know, if you're talking about an $800 a month rent, a coil stove may be just fine. If you're talking about a $3,500 a month rent, you're probably going to be looking at a little bit more deluxe appliance package, something with a glass top, or I mean, geez, even at that range, you're probably going to be talking about more luxury appliances than that. Maybe even, I don't know if that would qualify for like Wolf Range or something like that, something really high end. But the best way to determine what appliances you should be looking at, go look at some of the ads for other apartments in your same neighborhood. That'll kind of give you an impression of what types of appliances are being installed in your area. You know, glass tops versus coil stoves, freezers with water and ice dispenser versus not. Side by side or pull out bottom freezer, or, you know, whatever the case may be. There's a big difference between an 18 cubic foot refrigerator, you know, a basic with no bells or whistles, no ice maker or anything else, versus a, you know, the brand new Samsungs that you can knock on the door 3 times and the glass pane lights up to show you everything that's inside of your refrigerator. Big difference between those two appliances, and you want to make sure that you're staying consistent with what is happening in your market. So my recommendation would be go check out the market, see what other people are putting in their places based on, you know, the rents that you're getting and things like that, and make sure that you're kind of congruent and in line with whatever the rest of the market is doing. If you do go with a glass top range, spend a couple of minutes at move-in talking to the tenants about how to clean that surface up. Explain to them, you know, what cleaners they're going to want to use, how to avoid getting those nasty burn rings around the burners, how to get those off if you do get them, you know, things like that. Let them know that the glass top is not invulnerable. They can't just drop a full pot of pasta and water on there. It will break the top. And let them know that those tops are very expensive. I think the cheapest I've ever seen one of those glass tops, just the top, the glass top component, I think the cheapest I've ever seen one of those is about $450. So understand that there's also going to be more expense when it comes to repairing a glass top versus a coil stove that you could walk into Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever and just buy a new coil pack and buy a new drip pan for. So something to consider when you're talking about appliances. Move out procedures. I own a duplex. I live on one side and rent the other. The tenants moved out. I went in to inspect and start to make ready for new tenants. Both of the smoke alarms and the H2O2 sensors. Isn't H2O2 hydrogen peroxide? I'm going to assume she means CO2. Sensors were off the walls with no batteries. According to state law in Texas, the fine is 1 month's rent plus $100. Wow. There were broken tiles, paint on the flooring, no cleaning had happened for the year that they were in there. It's a total mess. How would you proceed? First thing I would do would be photo document everything. You know, every wall, every ceiling, every floor, every light fixture, inside and outside of every cabinet, inside and outside of every appliance. Take pictures of the make, model, and serial plates for every appliance so that you know what appliances are in there. You know, show how they left the unit. Take photos of all of the things that are, not just the things that are damaged, but the entire unit as a whole. You're trying to create a picture of what this place looked like when the tenants moved out. So what you really want is a nice move-in set of photos. Hopefully you have that. Really detailing the condition and the cleanliness level of the apartment at the time of move-in, and then again at the time of move-out. It sounds like these tenants are already gone. It sounds like you're going to more than use up their security deposit based on the damages and things like that. How would I proceed? I would get my photo set. I would get the unit turned over. Follow whatever the laws are in your state with regards to, you know, the security deposit disposition. Make sure you follow the timelines. You know, for instance, in New York, we have, I think, 15 days now to do a security deposit disposition. I don't know what the law is in Texas. You're gonna have to research that. But making sure that you are following those procedures to a T is what's going to get you to the next step. The next step is going to be, do you go to small claims court? Do you have to go to a larger court? If it's above a certain threshold, you won't be eligible for small claims. You might have to pursue it in a larger circuit court or something like that. that would be the next step, would be trying to get a judgment against the tenants, the former tenants, and then trying to collect on that judgment. You're really going to have to decide how much you want to pursue this. It's one of those situations where the smoke and CO detector thing, honestly, I would probably just put batteries in them and get them back on the law, get them back on the wall, excuse me, regardless of what the law is. Get your apartment back to safe. Whether or not you want to try to pursue that, that's crazy that the fine is 1 month of rent plus $100. Like, I don't know if that's a Texas statute or whatever, but that's crazy to me. Great, great for Texas if that's something that they can do, but that one's a little crazy to me. All the rest of this, though, it sounds like, broken tiles, paint on the floor, no cleaning, all of that sounds like beyond reasonable wear and tear or normal wear and tear. Sounds to me like that's damages that you're going to want to charge against that tenant security deposit. So that's probably the way I would handle it. Contact an attorney if you need more information. I'm certainly not an attorney, but an attorney could point you in the right direction. An attorney is also going to be able to advise you what your rights are given the current set of circumstances with regards to the global pandemic and things like that, whether courts are open and hearing small claims cases or whatever the case may be. An attorney is probably going to be in your near future if I was a betting man. That pretty much wraps things up for us here today. Thank you all so much for watching. We love producing Ask a Property Manager, and you can definitely help us to improve. Drop a question in the comments either on Facebook or YouTube, and your question may be answered in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content or if I brought some value to your day, please do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, subscription, and share helps us to grow and helps us to reach more people, and really that's our ultimate goal. That's why we do these every single week for you. Next episode will be next week on August 12th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard. We'll be back with another show that you won't want to miss. Catch us on Facebook at facebook.com/Buffalo Foreclosed Homes. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.